we go. Snap to Daniels. Sprint out. Throw to the right. Caught. Right corner of the end zone. Mason Taylor. Tigers win. Tigers win. Hey now. 32-31. And the fans storm the field. Wow.
What a scene, what a scene, what a scene. And I got to tell you, I mean, it makes college football great. You get done watching that game and you're just like, I love college football. Tweeted it out. A lot of you agreed. Love college football. That was everything that you want. And by the way, the second time this year, we see this epic game in an SEC environment involving Alabama. So Alabama goes down. Clemson also goes down in primetime on Saturday to Notre Dame. So now you've got these two teams, right? Let's think about what happened on Saturday. And a lot of you were reacting to it, by the way, on social media on Saturday. It's like there was a lot of elation about, oh, finally, we got a year without Clemson and Alabama. They're done. They're out of the playoff. Oh, yeah, this is great. All right. Well, why have you felt that way? Because these two teams have totally dominated the landscape. So what did it all mean? Okay, so first and foremost, you have to wonder yourself, well, are they out? I don't know if they're totally out. Maybe one more than the other, but there's small pathways and cracks in there for both Alabama and Clemson. But the fact remains is that these two teams have totally dominated college football during the college football playoff era. 7 appearances in the playoff out of 8 years for Alabama. 6 appearances in the playoff out of 8 years for Clemson. Ohio State and OU have 4. Nobody else has more than 2. Georgia, Notre Dame, and then a lot of teams with 1 appearance, right? So nobody has been dominating this sport like these two teams. More on those numbers in a little bit. So you have to wonder to yourself, like, well, who does this help? Okay, so if Clemson and Alabama might be falling by the wayside, who does this help? Well, I think there was one team in particular on Saturday that probably should be more happy than any other because their path got totally cleaned up in front of them. I was in Fort Worth, Texas, getting ready to call that TCU game, and the conversations that I kept having with Frog fans and even people within the program were like, hey, do we control our own destiny to get to the playoff? And I was honest with them, just like I was honest with you last week. And I said, I don't know. I don't know if you do, because at this point, the committee clearly values, at that point, Alabama and even Clemson, without the resume, Clemson didn't have the resume, over what TCU was doing. So even if TCU were to win out, all things being equal, it was a question. There was going to be a debate at the end. And I'm not saying that there won't be a debate at the end now, but boy, doesn't it seem a lot cleaner for the TCU Horned Frogs? Those Froggies all of a sudden have a clean path to the playoff. You can, I think, argue that now with only the potential of 3 Power 5 conferences having an undefeated champion at the end, the SEC with the potential of Georgia, the Big Ten with the potential of either Ohio State or Michigan, and now the Big 12 with the potential of TCU, the bottom line is I don't think that the committee will leave out a Power 5 champion that's undefeated if there's only 3 undefeated Power 5 champions. So you get what I'm saying here? Saturday was great for TCU. Great for them. They come back. It was a little harder than maybe you would expect against Texas Tech, but that's the Big 12. Remember, there's not a lot of margin between every one of these teams. And so now I think TCU can clearly say, if we win, we are in. Now, that's going to be really difficult. Why is that going to be difficult? Well, they go to Texas, to Baylor, and then they host Iowa State. They likely lose one of those. I think that they clearly go to the Big 12 championship game, but when you're talking about the playoff, that is a really tough road, in particular those 2 road games and what I would consider the other 2 best teams in the conference at Texas and at Baylor. Quentin Johnston has got to get healthy for them, their wide receiver, in order for them to run that table and be an undefeated Power 5 champ for that clean path. So that was number 1. Who did the Clemson and Alabama loss help? Number 1, TCU. Number 2, Tennessee. Tennessee, regardless of what happened in Athens. You look at it now, and from my perspective, Tennessee has a pretty clean path to the playoff. Why? Well, there's only 3 potential undefeated Power 5 champs. It's kind of the exact same argument I was just given for TCU. It cleans it up because now there is an argument for number 4 regardless of what happens. Tennessee's going to be in that argument. If you're 11-1 with your only loss to Georgia in Athens, there's absolutely an argument there for Tennessee. In fact, I think that their playoff hopes are about as equal as they were going into the game, as an undefeated, as the number 1 team in the playoff rankings. They still have a great win against Alabama at home. And this is still a team that even if they win out at 11-1, I think they have a great chance. They avoid, by the way, and this is the big one, they avoid the Bama-Georgia SEC championship game. So why is it helping Tennessee so much? What happened on Saturday is because they avoid that one-loss Bama SEC title, with Georgia being a one-loss non-champ. And then it's like, are we really going to include a third team from one conference? See, I don't think the committee would do that, personally. And because of that, now it cleans it up for Tennessee. They're clearly going to be the second team from the SEC, so long as Georgia goes in there and takes care of business, let's say, against LSU in that SEC championship game. So that's number 2. The third group that it really helped out, Clemson and Alabama's loss, was the Pac-12. And I think that that's pretty evident. It helps Oregon, clearly. It helps UCLA, and it helps USC. Now, if you're just going to look at it from a Pac-12 perspective, yeah, their path is, I think, a little more clearly defined now. But you can also say and argue UCLA and USC might have a better chance than Oregon. Now, that's not suggesting that I think they're better than Oregon. I'm saying that they may have a better chance than Oregon. Only because in the event that this Pac-12 ends with a one-loss champ, if it's USC or UCLA, they don't have the Georgia game hanging over their head like Oregon does. See, because if Oregon is that team, if they're the one-loss Pac-12 champ, all else being equal, let's just say, sake of argument, that the 2 teams being argued for in that 4-5 slot are Oregon and Tennessee. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I think Oregon might lose that argument. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that we should be taking and honoring championships, but the committee over the last 8 years has not been very consistent. They don't honor championships when they should, and they tend to be a little bit brand biased. Now, I'm not saying Oregon and Tennessee are all that different as it relates to brands, but I am telling you that one conference and their brand clearly wins the day in that argument, and that would be Tennessee. So I think Oregon still has some work, but boy, UCLA and USC as a one-loss Pac-12 champ, I think they would win the argument over a Clemson team that basically has no resume at this point. And so it clearly opens up a path for the Pac-12. So the 3 groups that were most happy with what happened in South Bend and then down in LSU were TCU, Tennessee, and the Pac-12. There is a 4th group, but it's not a specific group. I think it's a more overarching group. And the overarching group is, I think, the college football playoff, and maybe even you could argue college football as a whole. I'm not in the business of saying, like, it's better for the sport when the big brands lose, but I will tell you, I think it's better for the health of the playoff if we start to get more participants in the playoff. I just showed you the numbers earlier. These 2 teams, Clemson and Alabama, have totally dominated the last 8 years, and good on them and good for them. I'm rooting for them to always be great, okay? But at the same time, when you have a year in which you could see, hey, we might get some new blood, I do think that that's good, because I've argued, and I think correctly, that there are too many fan bases that feel marginalized on the outside of the top end of college football. And I think the more teams and fan bases and programs that we can bring into the fold, the better. That's just kind of point blank period for me. So when you look at Alabama and Clemson, there have been 32 spots available in playoffs so far over the 8 years. They've occupied 13 of those spots. 13. That's 41% of possible playoff spots have gone to 2 teams. They've represented 10 of 16 spots in championship games in the Natty. That's 63%, and they've represented 5 of 8 titles. Good on them. I'm telling you, that's what they should be doing. They should be trying to dominate. That's 63% of championship game spots and 63% of the titles so far in the last 8 years. All I'm saying is, like, hey, it's not bad for the whole of the sport, for the global aspect of the sport, if more people start getting involved, right? I think that it could be decent in that respect to have a little bit of new blood, to have more teams with skin in the game as we get into the middle of November and then ultimately into the end of November. So that's who those losses were good for.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.